Right, in this one, let's talk about both Uber and Lyft, who have been in the news this week, essentially due to a court ruling in California, which is actually the base of operations for both Uber and Lyft. So how is the stock of both Uber and Lyft going to react with this ruling? And also, what are Uber and Lyft doing about this? All of that discussion in this video. Also, just a look at the share prices, the stocks, and what analysts think is going to happen with the two companies. So let's first just get over to what exactly the court ruling means for both Uber and Lyft. So in California, the court ruling says that essentially they can't classify their workers as gig workers. And this is obviously huge. And actually, it's not the only place in the world that is trying to prevent them from doing this. California, also in the UK, Uber is actually banned from operating in London, mostly because of what Transport for London said were safety concerns, but certainly regulation is starting to pile on both of these businesses. In terms of their American businesses, obviously other states, other cities can also possibly look at this ruling to maybe try and go against Uber and Lyft as well. So definite headwinds for both Uber and Lyft with this regard. Now, the court injunction gives them 10 days from August 10th. So August 20th, and they can basically try and challenge this status. So essentially independent contractor status, that's gig workers. They don't want this, the court doesn't want this anymore. So providing benefits like health insurance, minimum wage, and that's what the court ruling wants. Now, I think minimum wage, that part of it actually isn't such a big deal, especially in cities. Uber workers are probably, with all the work that they can actually do and the amount that they can work and the amount of rides that they can do every day, the minimum wage thing I don't think is a massive issue for either Uber or Lyft. But if you go out to the outskirts where maybe drivers can't have as many rides per day, then maybe that is going to challenge them. And obviously if Uber and Lyft have to pay minimum wage, that means that their costs are going to be increased. And make no mistakes about this, they're not going to just absorb those costs. Those costs will be passed on to the customer paying for those rides, but certainly higher costs just makes them less competitive, and maybe people choose other options depending on the cost. So that's definitely part of the business that is just not really going to work for them if this goes through. So both companies have lost a bid to extend that 10-day injunction. So this is happening. And that's kind of odd because, yeah, California is the home to both of these, but they're really the state of California is going really against the two companies. So for right now, both Uber and Lyft are actually in kind of a strange position because obviously during the health situation, rides basically just fell through the floor, down 80%, 60% somewhat for Lyft. But obviously with economies reopening, these are going to be growing again. And there are many people that have lost their job who will be looking for exactly this type of work. And that is actually beneficial for people in California, for workers who actually need jobs. But California is trying to go against Uber and Lyft, which is obviously part of the reason why Uber and Lyft are so adamantly against this, both saying that they will just completely pull out of California. How is that going to affect their businesses? Well, actually, according to research, not really that big, because rides apparently in California are down up to 80% anyway, which means that revenue has already been lost essentially during this time. And maybe they're thinking, well, you know what, if we lost that anyway, then we're going to go really hardcore against what the court is trying to rule against us for. Proposition 22 is what Uber, Lyft and others have backed, and it will prevent them from having to classify their workers as gig workers. The problem is it won't be voted on until November, and if the court rules against them on August 20th, that means they will have a period of time where they will have to classify their workers as employees. And of course, this timeline just doesn't work out for either Uber and Lyft, which is exactly the reason why they have both said they will just absolutely pull out of California if the court ruling goes against them. So how about the future for Uber and Lyft and their businesses? Well, as I said, in California, rides have been affected by up to 80% anyway since the health situation. Now for Uber over Lyft, Uber has actually made some very good acquisitions recently and moved into some pretty good areas of growth that's really helped them out during the health situation. So that's grocery and food delivery. And we know they have Uber Eats, but they acquired Postmates as well. And they just have a good delivery and food delivery service, groceries, things like that, which has been a massive boon for Uber and really protected them against a lot of those losses in terms of the ride-hailing business. For Lyft, who doesn't really have as much of a big delivery service as Uber, they have been impacted far heavier. But analysts actually haven't really bashed the stock too much, but I'll get onto the analysts and the technicals in just a second. So in terms of market share, Uber has about 30% of the food delivery market share right now after the Postmates acquisition. Lyft really isn't a massive player in that, but both of them, so Uber, Lyft, Instacart, DoorDash, and Postmates have raised over $100 million to back Proposition 22, which would prevent them from having to classify their workers as gig workers. And as I said, Uber, the third way, Uber actually want more for their workers, but they don't want to classify them as employees. So this would mean they would be eligible for minimum wages. As I said, don't think that's going to be a massive issue, and that's why Uber want to have it, because Uber drivers going to be earning more than minimum wage, especially in inner cities. Then you have healthcare, subsidies, vehicle insurance. That is all that Uber wants. This is Proposition 22, so Lyft would have to do this as well, but they do not want to classify people as employees. And well, yeah, we'll just have to see in the next 10 days up until 20th of August and forward just what they are going to do. But I do believe that both Uber and Lyft are going to stay pretty strong on this one and just pull out of California if and when it happens, because I guess they just want to go hard on this. So in terms of the technicals and the stock price, Uber actually made a profit last year, but they have gone back into making a loss. This is fine. They're making some acquisitions and they're investing, so that's not really a big deal. But Uber now valued at a $52 billion market cap. It's trading around about $29 at the moment. 10 days ago, it was trading at some highs for the year, actually about $34. So you can see even with the health situation and what's going on, I don't think investors care too much about this. And in fact, I think this is just par for the course when it comes to Uber and Lyft, for example, and other companies in this space. Lots of regulation, lots of headwinds. But it seems like investors, even though it has come off a little bit over the last week or so on this news, it certainly hasn't been a massive drop because they do have other businesses that are taking up the slack. In terms of Lyft, as I said, revenue drop of 61% in the latest results, which came out a few days ago. But analysts really understanding it was the health situation, and going forward, they're still fairly positive on the business in general. So in July, rides increased by 78% over April. So as we can see, as the economy reopens, people are starting to use Lyft again. So fundamentally, the business looks quite stable, rather than that. Obviously, earlier in the year, we had all of those issues. So an $8 billion market cap for Lyft, much smaller company than Uber. And as I said, Uber has those other businesses that are just diversified, and I think do make it a more exciting prospect in terms of what they're actually able to do. So one bright spot definitely for Uber over Lyft is Postmates, Uber Eats, and all of that other thing. Lyft are trying to get into that space though, and I'll get onto that in a second, but let's look at the analyst comments. Uber, 24 buys, 4 holds, and 0 sells. This is according to tipranks.com, which puts a lot of different analysts together. They pretty much do like the stock and have some very good price targets, lowest at $35 up to $50. In terms of Lyft, 15 buys, 8 holds, and 0 sells. So again, the analysts in general do kind of like these companies fundamentally for the long term, despite all of these headwinds that we're getting at the moment. Even though Lyft is valued a lot lower than Uber because of those food businesses, Lyft, as I said, is starting to get into the essential deliveries. They started this during the health situation with essential medicines and a couple of other things. It's only 11 cities right now, but as you can see, it is there, and you would expect that they are trying to grow this. Can they enter that market, that food delivery market? You know, Uber spent a lot of money buying Postmates and having Uber Eats, and they basically bought that market share. Can Lyft do that? Well, there's no one really else to buy in that space. So they would have to essentially make new business for themselves, which certainly is more difficult. So similar businesses, and Uber being bigger, more established, has obviously moved into more diversified businesses overall. But analysts in general liking both of the stocks and seeing a lot of future potential in both of them. And of course, investors, long-term investors for the future, are really looking to autonomous and driverless and who will come out on top, because you've got Tesla in the mix as well on that one. And so there's a lot to look forward to, and we'll see which business actually can actually execute on that and which one comes out on top. Hope that was helpful for you though about Uber, Lyft, the current situation. Subscribe for way more like this, and I'll see you in the next one.